of you that don't, this is Hero Worship. I'm your host, Cytonius. The goal of this show is to objectively review comic book animated shows, both well-known and obscure. The show will be broken down into a 3-level structure that will consist of the overview, the pros and cons, and my final thoughts and ratings. You know, if there was ever a tough act to follow in the world of superhero animation, it would have to be Batman the Animated Series. That show redefined the character and stands as one of the most well-loved and respected animated shows of all time. And while Bruce Timm and his team seem to have the Midas touch when it comes to interpreting DC comic book characters, I really think he and his team had their work cut out for them when they took on the world's most famous superhero, Superman. Premiering on September 6, 1996 and ending its run February 12, 2000, Superman the Animated Series focuses on Superman and his struggle against his rogues gallery of supervillains and his life as mild-mannered reporter Clark Kent. Running for a total of 54 episodes, this series embraces the essence of what makes Superman such an endearing and well-loved character, not just in comics, but also in pop culture. Combining elements of action, adventure, science fiction, romance, and drama, this series embraces the mythology of Superman while adding something fresh to it, which isn't necessarily an easy thing to do considering that Supes has permeated every level of pop culture media, from comics, television, movies, and more. In fact, if Batman the Animated Series was a tough act for Superman to follow, Christopher Reeve and his portrayal of the character is even more difficult to live up to. But luckily for Superman, those films had run its course by the time the show aired, and I think fans are ready for a new spin on the Man of Steel. And because of the show Lois and Clark and his death in the comics several years earlier, the character was enjoying a nice surge in popularity during the early to mid-90s. Unlike a lot of prior incarnations of the character which had a slight tongue-in-cheek approach, such as the George Reeves series and the Christopher Reeve films, this is perhaps the most straightforward version of Superman I have yet to see. One of the main strengths this series had going for it was its stellar cast of voice actors, who all bring a level of class and great integrity to their roles. But I think the unsung hero of the series and even the DC animated universe, aside from Bruce Timm, is voice casting director Andrea Romano. Romano adds a level of dignity and respect to her casting choices, choosing not just cartoon voice actors, but voices with character. Television actor Tim Daly, who many fans may remember from his role as Joe Hackett on the 1990 sitcom Wings, a role that almost went to fellow DC Animated Universe voice actor Kevin Conroy, who we all know as Batman, and also as Dr. Pete Wilder from the TV series Private Practice, voices Superman, and brings a heroic charm and strength to the character. The Superman in this series is less of a naive Boy Scout and more of a modern-day man of action who is willing to trade punches with some of his most powerful and dangerous opponents. Clark Kent in this series is portrayed as less of an awkward nerd and more like an adept and skilled journalist. Everything from Superman's origin to his supporting cast is treated with respect and given a modern update for the 90s. Dana Delaney as Lois Lane in this series is just as spirited, headstrong, and as adventurous as she's ever been. She and Tim Daly have a decent amount of chemistry, but there isn't really anything new added to their relationship. In fact, the romantic triangle between Lois, Clark, and Superman made popular in the comics is downplayed to focus more on the action. And that's really what this series tends to focus on. The producers don't really delve into Superman's psychology or even into his romantic life. The series is straightforward, bare-knuckle action. Some of Superman's most well-known foes appear, and a few are even created just for the series, such as Luminous and Livewire. The villain with the most screen time is Lex Luthor, voiced by Clancy Brown, who many people may remember from his strong performances in The Shawshank Redemption and the very first Highlander film. The Lex in this series is more like the shrewd businessman with a god complex from John Byrne's Man of Steel run in the 1980s that revamped the character. His look is patterned after Kojak actor Telly Savalas. Producers chose Savalas for his cool look and disposition and felt that Luthor should have the same qualities. Personality-wise, Lex is smart, he's conniving and manipulative, and he's also the architect of Metropolis. This is my favorite version of Lex Luthor, and up until this point the only one that really made any sense to me. I never really understood the logic of Luthor the real estate agent or the arms dealer being a real threat to Superman. But then again, that's always been one of the many issues more modern fans have always had about Superman, and that's his rogues gallery. I think this show does the best that it can with its villains, and like Batman the Animated Series, it goes the extra mile to offer a backstory for a lot of the antagonists, with the only real exceptions being Luthor, Brainiac, and Darkseid, who all seem to represent an absolute villainy. Darkseid is voiced by actor Michael Ironside and is nothing less than amazing as the ruler of Apokolips and hated enemy of the Man of Steel. Everyone from Metallo, who was voiced by Malcolm McDowell, well known by film fans as Alex Delarge from A Clockwork Orange, the Parasite, Bizarro, and Mr. Mxyzptlk, voiced by Gilbert Gottfried, all show up and take on Superman, and they all deliver in spades. I can only think of one or two misfires in the villain department, the most notable being the villain Livewire, which is kind of ironic seeing that she was a character created for the series and not from the comics. My main issue with the character is that she has no real pathos or motivation for her villainy. Her origin in the series is that she's a shock jock that hates Superman for no real reason and gets caught in a lightning storm that Superman wasn't responsible for, and then all of a sudden she's one of his most hated supervillains. Fans didn't really gravitate towards the character in the same way they embraced Harley Quinn from Batman the Animated Series. In spite of this, DC Comics still incorporated her into their mainstream continuity. Livewire was voiced by TV and film actress Lori Petty, well known for appearing in films such as Tank Girl and A League of Their Own. One of the things that made this series stand out was its notable guest appearances from famous DC comic book characters. Everyone from Lobo, The Flash, Aquaman, Green Lantern, Steel, Orion, and yes, even Batman, all showed up and teamed up with the Man of Steel. This series really allowed the DC animated universe to open its reins and stretch out a little bit, even serving as much of the foundation for the series Justice League, which would come later, where many unresolved storylines from this show were either addressed or given some sort of a resolution. We also got to see that not only can Bruce Timm and his team handle dark and complex characters like they have before, but they can also handle science fiction and a more upbeat style of storytelling. One of my issues with the series, though, is that it didn't have enough episodes. There were definitely some missed opportunities to cut loose with the Superman universe. To some degree, I felt that the producers and writers exercised a little too much restraint in the early seasons with their storytelling. I would have loved to have seen a Death of Superman saga, or even an appearance by General Zod, the Eradicator, or Doomsday. You don't really need to go dark and complex with Superman, but I do feel that there was a bit of an edge that the series was lacking in the earlier seasons. Don't get me wrong, there were a lot of gems in the series, like the World's Finest episodes where Superman and Batman meet for the first time, and the first 3 episodes, The Last Son of Krypton, which retell the origin with a bit of a new and more modern spin on the famous origin. Episodes like Nighttime, which featured Superman taking up the mantle of Batman for a kidnapped Bruce Wayne, is one of my favorites. And the final 2 episodes, Legacy, which feature a Superman brainwashed by Darkseid, really show how far you can push a character like Superman. The tension between Darkseid and Superman is one of the highlights of the series, and the death of Superman's close friend and ally, Dan Turpin, in the episode Apocalypse Now Part 2 is one of the most chilling and memorable moments in the show. Unfortunately, the last season is really when they really started to take the gloves off and let loose a little bit. I would have loved to have seen where the character could have went after the events of Legacy and how he would go about regaining the trust of the people after being brainwashed by Darkseid. I do think the idea of Superman dealing with his villains and a subplot of xenophobia from the public would have added a bit of psychological and emotional weight to the series. And while this was a popular show, some fans feel that it didn't measure up to the standard of Batman the Animated Series. I think that's an unfair comparison, though, simply because both shows have different goals and each are successful at achieving them. Bruce Timm wanted to create a Superman show that was the opposite of the dark standard set by Batman and paid tribute to everything fans love about Superman. Reinterpreting a character like Superman and his universe is usually a hit or miss sort of thing. Sometimes too much of a certain element or too little of an element can either work for or against the Man of Steel. Superman is the wheel that keeps getting reinvented, and this series for the most part gets it right. It doesn't rely on trends or cliches to remind us of why we love Superman. It uses the mythology of the Man of Steel and it embraces it to the fullest. I'm giving Superman the Animated Series 4.5 stars out of 5. Check for me next time when I review Iron Man the Animated Series.